Bruce Feldman back from the national championship game. Your first blush thoughts are what?
The best team won. They were the best team in college football. They played really well. I mean, you talk about their first 5 series against a really good defense, really well-coached team at Notre Dame. They scored 4 touchdowns. And I give Notre Dame a lot of credit because at one point it was 31-7. You know, they have the first crazy drive where it's 10 minutes and just grind it out with Riley Leonard, get on the board first. Then Ohio State just answers, and Ohio State's just so good on both sides of the ball. And it feels like Notre Dame is really getting blown out of the building. And for a lot of folks, I'm sure a lot of people at home, they're like, oh, yeah, I remember Notre Dame in a national title game back in the Brian Kelly Manti Te'o days when Alabama just destroyed them. Mm-hmm. And to Notre Dame's credit, they made a big play on defense when Ohio State was driving again, punched the ball out, got a fumble, and then got it interesting. You know, like that takes a lot for a team to go up and be that resilient, to keep fighting, keep battling. Credit to Marcus Freeman and them, and obviously didn't go the way Notre Dame wanted it to end, but I thought it was, you know, it was a really, you know, if you're sitting there looking, you know, at the pictures of the guys on the sideline, I mean, I couldn't have been much more impressed because that's a team that they're without the best cover guy. Again, they play a lot of man, and Benjamin Morrison's been out for most of the season. They're without their best pass rusher, Riley Mills. And I know a lot of teams have injuries, and certainly Ohio State, they're without their center and their first-round, probably talent left tackle. But Notre Dame, to see how far they've come, especially under Freeman, has been pretty impressive. And I thought, just, you know, we were around Ohio State a lot, especially this year.
Yes.
And
on Fox.
On Fox, a lot. And I think knowing Ryan Day for a long time, knowing Ryan Day's family for a lot, like that was my story after the game, was to talk to his wife and his kids and his father-in-law and people really close to him about what they've endured. Way more than, you know, in the story, his father-in-law, who Ryan's known since he was like 9, mm-hmm. from New Hampshire, is a legendary Division II basketball coach, was up for the Basketball Hall of Fame, just a wonderful man, great sense of humor. And he was like, you know, my daughter grew up as a daughter of a coach in a coaching family, but coaches, you got a lot of stress, and the mom usually has to, you know, run the household because, you know, the dad's all, you know, hours are crazy and travel is crazy and everything else. But this other stuff that they dealt with.
Like what? I know you wrote about it. Give it out. Pop
yeah,
it
I
mean,
out there. The threats that the family dealt with to need round-the-clock protection.
This is after the loss to Michigan?
This is after the loss to Michigan. Talking to Ryan Day's son, RJ, who's a really talented young quarterback. He's only a sophomore in high school. But talking to him, he was like, you know, school was really rough. He didn't go out much till after the Tennessee game. You got to remember, that's like 3 weeks. Mm-hmm. It wasn't like Tennessee happened the week later. They didn't play Tennessee for like 3 weeks after Michigan game. So, you know, I think that's really hard. They have 2 young, you know, RJ is the oldest, but then 2 younger girls, and they know what's going on. And I think that's, you know, mind-blowing in that regard. And I give a ton of credit to Nina Day. That's Ryan Day's wife, how she handled it. She was and she told me she was really worried because in this day and age, you got to take everything seriously, especially when it comes to things of that nature. And on top of this, the symbolism she pointed out to me, or the symmetry of this, the day the national title game was Monday, January 20th. Mm-hmm. It was also the anniversary of when Ryan Day is a little boy, he loses his father. His father dies by suicide. I mean, the gravity of all that is just remarkable. So, you know, from the human component, you had to be, even if you're a Michigan fan, I think you have to feel for
of course.
that family.
Well, the question I have then, not to turn this into a therapy mm-hmm. session, but what do we take away from this? What do you take away from the Ohio State fan base? And that, I'm not painting it as a one big brush, but that sounds like there's a lunatic fringe, which is exactly what Kirk Herbstreit said and got eviscerated by a lot of Buckeye fans for saying such a thing, because I'm sure he was well aware of what you're referring to right now at the time that came out of his mouth in the booth when Tennessee was being destroyed by Ohio State and starting to turn the page to eventual national championship. What what's the takeaway here? That they, 4 games later, now it's all good? Like, is that what we're saying now?
Somebody in there had kind of half kiddingly said, I think we'll be okay for a couple of weeks. I don't have any concept of how small the percentage is of people who would go to that length. I think what you have to, figure, sort out with this is there are people, and look, it's not just the fans. There are people in the national media with big voices who will sit there and say, "Oh, if he loses to them again, he should be fired. If he lost to Tennessee, he should be fired." The guy is now 70-10 all time as a coach. Right? Jim Harbaugh lost a lot of games to Ohio State. For a long time, he could not beat them.
Yes.
Obviously, he remedied that. Yeah, and so I think people can say, oh, they're making X amount of millions of dollars and everything is justified in the pressure on that. But I think there's also some other parts of this where you're like, okay, who are you going to get who's going to do a better job than this guy did? Now, that was before he won a national title. He's the one who is the architect of this program. I mean, he's done a really good job hiring a really good staff, but I think, you asked me about like, what's the takeaway from this? You can wag the finger at people who don't have perspective and all, but look at, that's kind of the society we're in right now. It's a really, it's a really toxic place in a lot of places in, online. And I think that stuff is unfortunately it's out there, and I think my takeaway was something Nina Day told me the other night, which is like, you get knocked down, people fail. The most important thing is you got to get back up and you got to fight. And I think that is a great lesson. I mean, again, to their credit is you don't have to be an Ohio State fan, I think, to buy into this part. I mean, Ryan Day's been really proactive and vocal about talking about mental health issues because of what he has been through from a time he was really young. And I think those are important issues for him with his platform to use. And hopefully that stuff will now, when you become a national championship coach, when you become a Super Bowl winning, whatever it is, your platform grows so much more significantly. Obviously he had a platform because he was a head coach at Ohio State, but just when you have those credentials onto it. I mean, as a quick aside, I remember Mike Leach's book, we were working on it, and he had his agent has also represented Tom Coughlin. And Tom Coughlin won Super Bowls with the Giants. And I remember thinking, well, I mean, he's obviously a terrific coach, but like nowhere as interesting as Leach was. But then the idea is, well, when you win a Super Bowl, you have the magnitude behind you. It doesn't matter, beyond that. And I, again, to say that to get to this is like, I think for Ryan Day's position now there's only a couple other guys who are still in college football who coaching now, active, who have won national titles.
Yeah, with Harbaugh and across the
Mac
street.
Brown's gone, Saban's gone.
On the TV set,
They're not working. It's basically Kirby Smart, Dabo, and now him. I mean, it's kind of mind-boggling that few of the guys, the last guys who won, are all out of the business. Mac Brown, who won a long time ago, Ed Ogeron, who won it at LSU. Obviously, Saban won a bunch of them. I mean, those guys aren't there anymore. Obviously, Harbaugh's in the NFL, but now Ryan Day joins a very, very small fraternity.
Bruce Feldman here on the Rich Eisen Show. So let's just stir it up a little bit here, if you don't mind. Do we live in a Big Ten world now? What do you think? Has the balance shifted?
There is, yeah. I mean, you have to go back to another one of your arch rivals. Michigan State won back-to-back in the 1960s,
right,
under Duffy Daugherty. That's the last time a Big Ten school, the Big Ten had back-to-back national champs.
Well, and now with Oregon part of the conference, Saban sitting on a television set, and
it's a different world in the like NIL and the portal has changed the dynamic a lot, because right now it was harder to like store, elite prospects and elite talent, because a lot of the times those guys are leaving as freshmen and go to play someplace else. And so I think it's why some of the talent has also been scattered around. I mean, South Carolina had a really good team this year. They had 5-star guys and big time difference maker guys who are at South Carolina now, where maybe 5 years ago they would have been at Georgia or they would have been at Alabama. It's not to say that those teams aren't still really talented, but they're not as talented or that much more talented than some of these other places. So some of that SEC talent now is in Oxford, Mississippi. Certainly some of it is now in the Big Ten. A lot of it is in Columbus, Ohio.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, Caleb Downs just...
They have the two best players in college football. One came from South Florida, Jeremiah Smith. The other one was on Nick Saban's roster.
And how many are coming back?
Well, those two guys are. And I mean, those are one's definitely the best player in the country. I mean, J.J. Smith is incredibly talented. He's only going to keep getting better because you hear about his work ethic and his drive. Mm-hmm. Caleb Downs is an elite defensive back and a leader. You know, they went in the portal. They've got two really good offensive tackle guys to step in. They have a really good tight end they added who, you know, the guys inside the program tell me they kind of reminds them of Zach Ertz. So that's a plus. They're losing Will Howard, who I don't think until late Monday night got enough credit for being.
He was superb.
Yeah, he was.
He was superb. I was equating him to Phil Simms in the Super Bowl.
Yeah, what was he? He didn't miss. 22 of 25 or 23 of 25. Yeah, he didn't.
And the throws were awesome. They were exactly where he needed to be. He had a full command. He used his legs appropriately. He stayed away from the big hit, which he did not do against Michigan. He was terrific. He's
terrific. Really smart, and I think they have a lot of talent around them. They just, two terrific running backs. The defense is so good.
Those guys are violent.
I know.
They make moves in the hole. My God, do they make moves in the hole? And between tackles, they're terrific.
To me, has always been like a wow running back. You saw it on the 75-yard screen pass right before halftime in the semifinal game. You saw Judkins. They talk about Judkins, about his toughness and what he brings.
Right.
I mean, they'll still be really good. They are losing a boatload of outstanding college football players at all three levels. We talk a lot about, and rightly so, about Jack Sawyer and JTT, the two defensive ends. They've been there forever. And Cody Simon is a guy that, knowing James Laurinaitis, who's a linebacker coach, cannot stop raving about him. Mm-hmm. Not just what he's on the field, but the sacrifice and the selflessness and all the things that I think become integral when you're going to have a national title team. Because what I think was an eye-opening thing for a lot of us who cover the sport day in and day out is it really felt like there was two different seasons. It was the first season, which was, and maybe this is something like, I don't cover the NFL year-round, but it's like there's the regular season, which is long, and then there's the playoffs, which also can be long. Because talking to Chip Kelly after the national title game, his point was about the Michigan loss was, you can sit and look there and go, okay, back in the day, if you lose your last regular season game, you may be going to like the Blue Bonnet Bowl.
Yeah, you're toast.
And he said, so it's either, you have to look at it, you can look at it one of two ways. It's either a tombstone or a stepping stone. And clearly that program believed that it was going to be a stepping stone. And I think the way they prepared and managed, I think there's a lot of things that other coaches are going to take from how this is, because it's just a different world. They both played 16 games, and they could have, Notre Dame couldn't have played 17 because there's no conference title game.
Right.
But if Penn State had gotten there, or if Ohio State did play in the big, they would have played 17 games.
So did Chip Kelly say that the loss to Michigan was actually big in their, and I'm not trying to troll here. I'm not. Like, he had his fun yesterday with Overreaction Monday on a Tuesday saying Michigan shouldn't have planted the flag. That was
the impetus. I don't.
But did Chip Kelly basically say our loss to Michigan?
He didn't say it like that. But a couple of weeks ago at the Rose Bowl, I remember Tyleik Williams, who's an outstanding defensive tackle, was like, that was a wake up call. That was something that a lot of players talked about after the Rose Bowl.
Then you're welcome, and I'm just glad Michigan's national championship run, we didn't have to have that as a stepping stone. There were other issues that Michigan had to overcome.
What are you talking about? You had like 7 years in a row of being the stepping stone like that. Like, I know enough Michigan people inside that program talked about beat Ohio period. It was like,
no, I'm sure.
I think Ohio State had an integral role in Michigan upping its game.
Oh, no question.
Well, that's the way it should be.
That's the way I totally agree. What is the college football community talking about Jayden Daniels right now?
I think a lot of people are really happy for him, because he was a guy who kept getting better. The work he did with, and there was a lot of cutting edge stuff that he did with Jack Marucci, who's like
the VR stuff you're talking about,
and
because he's still doing it.
Yeah,
and everybody's still crediting the fact that the VR stuff helps him see the game, and so his ability to do what he's doing
and process
and make decisions
and
see it. Everybody's saying these VR goggles are the major thing.
So Jack Marucci, who I would argue is as brilliant a guy as there is working in sports, longtime trainer at LSU. I mean, for like 30 years.
Is this from the Bat family?
That he is Marucci Bats from that. Started out like you should have him
That's
on
so cool.
All right.
someday. Just
sold.
Incredibly humble guy to the point where you're like, wait, that's you? Kind of like, I think he started out making like 5 bats maybe for Manny Ramirez in his backyard, and only sent him.
What was in him? Sorry.
The best wood, apparently, possible.
Wow.
But so he did that, but also he's been involved with people internationally who had this technology, and Jayden Daniels really bought into it. And he went from being a good dual threat quarterback to a record-setting Heisman winner to a guy who's now tearing up the NFL as a rookie.
Tearing it up.
It's a great story, because when he was at Arizona State, I felt like he was kind of a one-man. It was a mess with Herm. There was all kinds of screwball stuff going on there. They had NCAA issues, around, and he was a good player, but I don't think anybody saw this. And now, I mean, just the fact that what he's done so far, like if you had said to me, a year ago at this time, like I'm buying CJ Stroud. I thought he should have been the first pick of the draft because he's so accurate, and he checked off all the boxes. He's pretty athletic. He's really smart. He sees the game. He's really competitive. He's really driven. All those things. But he's incredibly accurate. To see what Jayden's done has been.
He surpassed it. He's the best rookie quarterback I've ever seen. And because all the other rookies who have gotten to the conference championship level, including Ben Roethlisberger, who didn't lose a game his rookie season until the championship game, they were all game managers, or at least that was the way that the coaches were coaching them. These coaches are like, keep doing it, Jayden. And as a matter of fact, the high leverage situation you were just in quarter numbers 2, it's going to be more high leverage in quarter 3 and then quarter 4, and we're going to still do it. And it's going to be 4th down, and it's going to have the game on the line. And they're like, go do it. They want him to do that, and now they expect him to do that because the rest of the team has bought into it. I've never seen anything like it.
Well, it's also the franchise he's changed.
Yeah.
Like, when was the last time it was like, oh, that guy's the face, Darryl Green? I mean, like.
Well, I guess RG3 might be
for a minute.
For a season. Correct.
Yeah. Then look, I mean.
Correct.
Yeah, this is.
It's unprecedented.
I mean, they didn't get to this level.
That is correct. No, he lost to Russell Wilson, who was the last rookie quarterback to win a playoff game on the road since Jayden Daniels, who's now won 2 of them. And if he wins this weekend, he'll be the first quarterback in playoff history to eliminate the 1, 2, and 3 seeds in his own conference. Back here on the Rich Eisen Show radio network, we're here with Bruce Feldman. So what is the general sense now that the 12-team playoff is done? What do people think about it? What do you think?
I think people loved the what it did for not just the regular season, but I think there was intrigue about. They really liked that it was some of the games were on college campuses. I think they would like to see more of that, but I think they're not severing ties with the bowl people that have had long-standing relationships. So I think that's not changing. I would have suspected some point. So they had the leaders of the sport got together on Sunday just for like an hour and a half. And if there was any tweaks or changes they were going to make, they had to be made. They had to be voted on unanimously, I think, which is harder to do. I think you'll see more change, real change, a year from now when they can, and they don't need it to be 100%. approve that there can be.
Why was this? It's just a bylaw that they're all going to.
Well, I think what's going to change, though, is you have so much power that is with the head of the Big Ten, the head of the SEC. I don't know, how that dynamic is going to help the people who are on the lower end of the food chain. But, how the seeding happened. Remember, we had, like a 7 and an 8 playing. I mean, they weren't the 7th and 8th best team.
Hey, man, we had Ward Manuel on the day after the field was set and the brackets were set. And he's just like, they just went 1 through 12 and it just came out the way it came out. And I agree with you 100%. And, we had Dan Wetzel of Yahoo on, and he said when they first came up with the idea that the Power 5, 4 of them would have to get the buys. Mm-hmm. It was done when there was a Pac-12. It was done when Texas and Oklahoma were in the Big 12. Right. And now things have changed that it shouldn't be done that way. We should see maybe a runner-up of a conference get a bye over a winner of another conference when you're using common sense eye test and things of that nature. And I understand that makes things more subjective and open for debate and anger. But let's get this right. We think what should be done is the bye week teams get a home game too. Now you're messing with the bowls, which is a big problem.
That is a big issue. I know this from talking to one of the coaches who played a first-round game, and he was on a road team. Mm-hmm. And he said the home field advantage is huge because everything has to be like a silent count. You're not getting off the ball as fast as the other team. I mean, you looked at the biggest example of that was, I think Kevin Jennings, the SMU quarterback, is a pretty good player. He had a nightmare of a day going into Happy Valley, and it was like noon, but he was like a turnover machine because he looked rattled, not just by the noise, but also the cold. There's like different elements. I mean, you talk to people who are at Ohio State, they were like, Tennessee didn't even want to be there that night. They felt like.
And you would think if Oregon does win the Big Ten,
they did.
Yeah. They should have gotten whoever was their first round opponent at home. Stick them up there in Oregon, which is one of the toughest places to win. Like that, if they are the number 1 seed of the entire thing, so
you're going to give them. Yes, make the regular season count more because I'm a firm believer. The college football season is long, but it's not as long as certainly any other sport. But you don't want to devalue the regular season. And I feel like if you gave that kind of reward for it, I think that would add incentive to the regular season. I mean, the part that I struggle with is, and there was a lot of pushback after the first round of the games. Indiana, gets beaten pretty handily by Notre Dame, and SMU gets drilled. But then all of a sudden, like later in the at the end of the first round, Tennessee from the SEC also gets smacked around by Ohio State. But I think people are sitting there going, wait, you're a team, and this is especially the SEC teams, that was going to get the benefit of the doubt, or usually does. But you're going to have 3 losses, and it's one thing to have like one bad loss, but you have like a bad loss and then a couple other losses that are like not against elite teams. It's like you can't have that many mulligans, right, and still make the playoff. And I think that's the thing that you can look at Indiana's resume. And by the way, Indiana ended up losing to the national champs, and they ended up losing to a team that played for the national title. And they did beat a team that beat Alabama in the bowl game, So I think it's just like, hey, when you have a 12-team playoff, and even if it ever ends up at 16, the resumes are going to be flawed because you have that many more. It's not 4 anymore.
The
it's
national
12.
champion lost 2 games, including one of the worst losses by that team in the history of their rivalry. Honestly, one of the Michigan team that beat them was one of the, as you know, more troubled,
limited
versions of Michigan. But so you need to throw it. Yeah. You need to throw out a 6 seed in the NFL might win the Super Bowl. Right? You know what I'm saying? So
we accept that. We accept that more. Didn't the Giants win a Super Bowl as a wild card a long time ago?
Of course they did. I mean, we've seen 6 seeds do it multiple times. And we don't bat an eye in the professional sport, but the reason why is because the schedule amongst everybody in the NFL is as close to even. In college football, when they're choosing who to play and when and what the bye week is and all that on their own, that's the issue. You gotta handle all of that. That might actually make the playoff better if you do. And so a 2 or 3 loss team can still make it, and we won't bat an eye, and they might win the whole damn thing too. Like, we just saw that. So in the 2 minutes I have left with you, is Deion going anywhere, or is he staying put?
I had heard Tennessee has stepped up. Tennessee. I heard Colorado had stepped up pretty significantly.
What, NIL and stuff like that, or for him?
For him.
Okay.
I know Rick George, the AD, has a lot of value for Deion and what he's meant to the program. Not only meant to the program, it's meant to the school, meant to the state, all of it. It's just what are his options going to be? If Deion could be an NFL head coach, does that make him sit there and go, okay, this is a place, this is the next chapter for me? I know, having been around his program and him some, and just being there at the Alamo Bowl, the part that you probably can't get the same in the NFL is helping develop young men and take them from a place in their lives where there's uncertainty and you can be transformational in that role. That part I get.
And that's important to Deion, for real.
Yeah,
and he loves that.
It's just going to be a different chapter if he stays there. Whatever Colorado has to do to keep him financially, if there's no NFL in the thing, it's like, to me, that would, and it's obviously easy for say it's not my money,
right?
But it's like, that would seem like a no-brainer, because without him, the program is and was totally irrelevant, and with him, it is nationally relevant. You can hate Deion if you're sick of all the coverage and content and all, but people pay attention to it, and they got a lot better with him there. So, what is it gonna? It's 2 pieces. It's the NFL. I don't know how much Colorado can compete with the NFL if the NFL comes for him.
Right,
Bruce. But if it doesn't, it's like, okay, what do we need to do to make sure that this relationship is still thriving?
And when you look at it overall, I could see why Deion would want to move to the Cowboys. It doesn't look like the Cowboys are going to hire him. Looks like they're going to, they're already circling around either Kellen Moore or Brian Schottenheimer. The Raiders just hired a general manager from the Buccaneers, John Spytek, who Brady knows for forever and a day. And they do have a head coaching position open. They could potentially draft his son. I don't know if that's what they're thinking or what the new general manager would be thinking. I know what the new general manager would be thinking. Brady would know.
Yeah.
So I don't know if this is going to be something that pops over the next few days for Prime. But other than that, just staying put and building this next iteration, no doubt one would think, even with the talent that's leaving, stronger version of what he's doing. The Big 12 is a path to a bye week, man. So you can be in the college football thing. It almost was this year.
And it's winnable, Rich, because you look and you saw Arizona State was picked to finish last in it. They had a young quarterback who's really talented, and Cam Scatterbu, who was an amazing story, no offers, went to Sac State, and a lot of credit to Kenny Dillingham. But that program came out of nowhere, and they made it to the playoff, and they almost beat Texas, by the way. So
yeah, I know. And easily the best playoff game. You could say, was it the best playoff game, period? Or Ohio State, Texas got interesting at the end? You know what I mean?
Arizona State, Texas was pretty awesome.
You're looking back at the entirety of the college football playoff. I think that was the best game.
Yeah, I think so.
But again, they're in the right conference to do that from.
Yeah.
Because anybody has a chance. BYU was picked to finish 13th. That was the team, obviously, that blew them out in the Alamo Bowl. BYU could be a top 15 team this year. They would have a chance. And we know Deion has 2 very coveted quarterbacks there. One was a big recruit from the state of Georgia. The other one was a prolific mid-major quarterback. The offensive line has definitely gotten better from where it was a year ago, and I think should keep improving. It's just, again, I think Colorado is committed to taking another step with him. But the program's going to feel a lot different just because they won't have Travis Hunter, won't have Shedeur. But if they still have Deion, I think they'll still be able to attract a lot of talent.
Well, they'll still have Bucky, right, doing all the social media, which means I think he's number one atop the Sanders depth chart.
Still number one.
Okay, very good. Catch the Rich Eisen Show every single day on the Roku channel, 12 to 3 Eastern, for free.